It started with a text message. That sounds small, doesn't it? Like nothing important. But sometimes the biggest lies in our lives begin with the tiniest moment of carelessness. A notification, a password saved in the wrong place, a moment when someone forgot to cover their tracks. I was sitting at my kitchen table that Tuesday morning. The sun was just coming through the window, and I had my coffee in front of me, the same coffee I drink every single morning. My husband was already at work. It was just me and the quiet house, and that's when my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert. Now, I get bank alerts all the time. Usually they're just small things. A payment cleared, a deposit came through. I barely even look at them anymore. They just become background noise in your life. But this one was different. This alert said, account transfer initiated, $2,400 withdrawn. I looked at the date. It was that morning. Early morning. 5:47 a.m. to be exact. I didn't withdraw that money. My hands felt cold. I set my coffee down and opened the banking app on my phone. My account showed the transfer, but something was wrong. It wasn't from my account. It was from a joint account that I shared with my mother-in-law. Wait, let me back up. That's probably confusing. You see, my mother-in-law, Helen, had been struggling financially for years, and because my husband was a good son, maybe too good of a son, we had created a joint bank account with her, just for emergencies. We'd put money in there to help her pay her bills, to make sure she had what she needed. It was supposed to be a safety net, a way to make sure she never had to worry about paying for rent or food or medicine. We trusted her with that money, and she was bleeding it dry. I sat there staring at that phone for what felt like forever. $2,400. Just gone. Transferred out of our account in the middle of the night. And when I looked closer, I saw it wasn't the first time. There was another transfer, $1,800. Then another, $950. Then another, $3,200. My heart started beating faster. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the full account history. What I saw made me feel sick. There were dozens of transfers. Dozens. All going back months. Maybe longer. And they all had the same pattern. They happened early in the morning, when most people were still asleep. When nobody would notice. I did the math in my head, and I couldn't believe the number I came up with. I added it up again. Then a third time. $37,000. She had taken $37,000 from us. My mother-in-law, the woman I had cooked holiday dinners for, the woman I had bought gifts for every Christmas, the woman I had visited in the hospital when she had her surgery, had stolen from us, from our family, from our future. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't do any of the things I thought I would do if something like this ever happened. Instead, I just sat there, very still, very quiet. And I felt something shift inside me, something cold and clear, because I realized something in that moment. I had no idea who Helen really was. And more importantly, I realized that this was about to get much worse before it got better. I'm going to tell you everything. How we got here, how I didn't see it coming, how I finally fought back, and what happened when she asked me for help, not knowing I knew exactly what she had done. This is the story of how I lost my trust in the woman I called family, and how I got my power back. To understand what happened, you have to understand Helen. Helen was my husband Michael's mother, and for the first 5 years I knew her, she seemed perfect. Not in that annoying way where someone is obviously putting on a show. She just seemed like a normal, kind woman who had raised a good son. She was in her early 60s when I met her. She had short gray hair that she colored sometimes, and she always wore these flowy shirts that she bought at Target. She loved to garden. Not the fancy kind of gardening where you have a designer yard. She just grew tomato plants in containers on her front porch and gave them away to the neighbors. She was the kind of woman who baked cookies for the local bake sale. She volunteered at the church. She sent birthday cards on time. Everyone in the family loved her. When Michael and I got engaged, Helen cried happy tears. When we got married, she gave a toast at the reception that made everyone laugh. She told stories about Michael as a kid that were actually funny, not embarrassing. She was warm, She was present. She was the kind of mother-in-law that people complain about not having. And then, about 3 years into our marriage, things started to change. Michael's father had passed away about a decade before I met him. It was sudden, a heart attack. Michael had been only 19. His father had left behind some insurance money, but it wasn't a lot. Helen had managed to keep the house, but money was always tight. She worked part-time at a doctor's office as a receptionist. It paid the bills, but not much more than that. I never thought about it much. Some people are just in that position. You work, you pay your rent or mortgage, and you hope nothing expensive breaks. But Helen seemed to get more anxious about money as time went on. She would mention it at dinner. "Oh, the air conditioning is acting up again. I can't afford to fix it." Or, "I got my property tax bill. I don't know how I'm going to pay for that." Or, "My car is making a noise. I'm afraid it's going to need expensive repairs." And Michael, being the good son he was, would help. He'd get the air conditioning fixed. He'd help her with her property taxes. He'd take her car to a mechanic and pay for the repairs. But it was never enough. There was always another bill, another problem, another financial crisis. And Helen seemed to be getting more and more anxious. She started bringing it up more often. She started making comments about how she didn't know what she would do when she got older. What if she got sick? What if she couldn't work? What if she ended up alone? It wore on Michael. I could see it. He wanted to help his mother, but there was only so much we could do. We had our own lives to build. We wanted to save for a house. We wanted to start a family someday. So when Helen brought up the idea of the joint bank account, it seemed like a perfect solution. "It would just be for emergencies," she said. She brought it up over Sunday dinner. We were at her house, sitting at her kitchen table. Michael had just helped her fix a leak in her roof, and he was tired. "I don't want to keep asking you for money, but if I had access to some funds, just in case something came up, I wouldn't feel so scared all the time." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like Helen was trying to take some of her anxiety off Michael's shoulders. And honestly, at that point, we had some money saved. Not a fortune, but enough. We could afford to help her. And if it made her feel more secure, if it made her stop worrying so much, then wasn't that worth it? "Of course," Michael said. He reached over and patted her hand. "We'll set it up. You shouldn't have to be scared." So we did. We set up a joint account. Michael and I put in $5,000 to start. We told Helen it was there if she needed it. For emergencies, for when things got tight. We told her she could use it, but we also kind of expected her to tell us when she did. Or at least to talk to us about big purchases. Helen seemed so grateful. She hugged Michael. She actually hugged me, which was unusual because she wasn't usually very physically affectionate. She said, "Thank you. Thank you so much. This means everything to me." And I believed her. I believed that she meant it. I believed that she was a good person who was just scared about the future. And I believed that the account would help her, that it would give her peace of mind, and that she would use it responsibly. I was so naive. The first few months, the account seemed quiet. Helen would use it occasionally, $100 here, $50 there. When we asked about it, she would explain, "I had to get my medication refilled, and I was short on cash that week." Or, "My electric bill was higher than expected." Nothing alarming. Nothing that made us think anything was wrong. But then Michael's sister got married. Sarah was Helen's other child, and she lived across the country. She had been planning her wedding for almost 2 years. And of course, Helen wanted to be there. She wanted to help. She wanted to be part of the celebrations. The problem was the wedding was expensive. The flights alone were $1,000. The hotel was going to be almost another 1,000. And Helen wanted to help pay for things. The rehearsal dinner, gifts for the bridesmaids, that kind of thing. Michael and I paid for Helen's flights and hotel. We did it without hesitation, because that's what families do. And Helen was so grateful again. She kept saying she would pay us back, but she never did. After that, things seemed to shift. Helen's financial anxiety seemed to get worse. and the account started to get used more frequently. At first, we didn't really keep track. Michael would put money in when she asked. Sometimes I'd put money in. We figured Helen was using it for her regular bills. But I should have asked more questions. I should have looked at the statements. I should have noticed that the account was being drained much faster than it should have been. If I had, I would have caught this much earlier. If I had, maybe the damage wouldn't have been so bad. But I didn't. And that's something I've had to forgive myself for. Because you can't control other people's choices. You can only control your own. And I chose to trust Helen. I chose to believe that she was a good person. I chose to be kind. And Helen chose to abuse that kindness in a way I never saw coming. The first time I actually noticed something was off, I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. It was about 6 months after we had set up the joint account. Michael and I were sitting down to do our taxes. We did them ourselves, which meant we were going through all of our financial statements for the year. And I was looking at our bank accounts, making sure everything added up. That's when I saw the account balance was much lower than I expected. We had put in about $15,000 total throughout the year, and most of it was gone. Michael, did you take money out of the Helen account? I asked. We called it the Helen account, by the way. That should have been a sign right there, the fact that we had a special account with a person's name on it. He looked over my shoulder at the screen. What? No, I haven't touched it in months. Why? It's almost empty. We had about 10,000 in there last month, and now it's down to 1,200. Michael frowned. That's weird. I wonder what happened. And that's all he said. That's weird. Now, a reasonable person might have said, let me call my mother and ask her about this. A reasonable person might have looked at the transaction history. A reasonable person might have gotten angry, or at least concerned. But Michael was not feeling particularly reasonable that day. He was stressed about taxes. He had just had a difficult day at work, and he loved his mother. So instead of investigating, he just shrugged and said, I'll ask her about it. And then he went back to doing the taxes. He never did ask her about it. Or if he did, he never told me what she said. That should have been my second warning sign. The first was the account itself. The second was Michael's reluctance to deal with it. But I let it go. I told myself that maybe Helen had some emergency we didn't know about. Maybe she had medical bills. Maybe her car broke down. There could be legitimate reasons. I let it go, and I tried not to think about it. But something in my gut was starting to feel wrong. A few months later, we decided to buy a house. This was a big deal for us. We had been saving for years, and we finally had enough for a down payment. We were going to be homeowners. It was exciting and terrifying. Our mortgage application process was long and complicated. The lender wanted to see all of our financial records for the past 2 years. Every bank account, every credit card statement, every transaction over a certain amount. And that meant they wanted information about the joint account with Helen. It's fine, the loan officer said. It's a family account. We just need to document it. So I pulled up the statements, all of them, 2 years' worth. And that's when I saw it. The withdrawals, all of them, laid out in black and white on the computer screen in front of me. $2,000, $1,500, $3,000, $900, $2,200, $1,800, $2,500, over and over and over again. And they weren't small amounts taken out over time. They were large amounts, withdrawn in a pattern, multiple times per week sometimes, always in the early morning hours, always without explanation. I felt my throat get tight. Michael, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I need you to look at this. He came over and looked at the screen. I watched his face change. I watched the confusion turn to realization. I watched realization turn to anger. What the hell? He said quietly. I don't know, I said. I don't know where this money went. We need to call the bank, Michael said. Maybe there's fraud. Maybe someone hacked the account. So we called the bank, and the bank told us that no, there was no fraud. Every withdrawal was made using the debit card that was registered to Helen's name on the account. Every withdrawal was authenticated with her PIN number. Every single one. Helen had taken the money. There was no question about it anymore. There was no way to explain it away. Helen had methodically, deliberately, and secretly stolen almost $40,000 from us over the course of 2 years. Michael was silent for a long time after we got off the phone with the bank. "We need to talk to her," I finally said. "I know," Michael said. But he didn't sound angry. He sounded sad. He sounded like a son who had just realized his mother was not the person he thought she was. We called Helen that evening. We asked her to come over the next day. We didn't tell her why. We didn't want to do this over the phone. Helen showed up the next morning with a casserole. She always brought food when she came over. It was one of her things. She liked to make sure we were eating well. "I made your favorite," she said, smiling as she handed it to me. "Chicken and rice." "Thanks, Helen," I said. And I meant it. Even knowing what I knew, I still appreciated the gesture. Even knowing she had stolen from us, there was still a part of me that wanted her to be the person I thought she was. Michael was sitting on the couch. He looked exhausted. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. Helen's smile faded. "Is everything okay? Is someone sick?" "No," Michael said. "Nothing like that. But we need to talk about the joint account." I watched Helen's face, and in that moment, I saw something shift. I saw her expression change. Just for a second. Just enough for me to know that she knew exactly what was coming. "What about it?" she said. But her voice was different now. It was careful. "We've been looking at the statements," Michael said, "for our mortgage application." Helen didn't say anything. "Mom, there's almost $40,000 missing from that account. I need to know where it went." Helen sat down very slowly. She looked at the floor. She didn't say anything for a long time. And then finally she said, "I can explain. I can explain." Those words, those 3 words should have made me feel better. An explanation, a reason, something that would make sense of all of this. But they didn't make me feel better. They made me feel worse. Because Helen didn't say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." She didn't say, "I'm ashamed, I did something wrong." She said, "I can explain." Like there was some logical justification for stealing from her son. Like there was some way to make this okay. "I've been struggling," Helen said quietly. She still wasn't looking at us. "More than I told you." "How?" Michael asked. And there was something in his voice, not quite anger, but the beginning of it. "We gave you money, we paid your bills, we helped with everything." "I know," Helen said, "and I'm grateful for that, really. But there were other things I didn't tell you about." "Like what?" I asked. I had to ask. I had to know. Helen looked up at me, and her eyes were wet. She was crying. Or at least, she was trying to look like she was about to cry. I'm not sure, honestly. After what I knew, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. "I have a credit card debt," she said. "A lot of it. From before. From when your father was alive." Michael's eyes widened. "You never told me you had credit card debt." "I didn't want you to worry," Helen said. "It was my problem. I was handling it." "Except you weren't handling it," I said. The words came out harder than I meant them to. "You were using our money to handle it." "The interest was so high," Helen continued. She was in full explanation mode now. "And the minimum payments kept going up. I couldn't keep up. And I was embarrassed to tell you. You were already helping me so much. How could I ask for more?" "So you just took it?" Michael said. "Without asking?" "I was going to pay it back," Helen said quickly. "I was going to. Once my situation improved. Once I got my debt under control. I was keeping track of it. I was going to repay every penny." But you didn't, I said. You're still taking money out of the account, as recently as last week. Helen's face flushed. Yes, well, I still have more payments to make. Michael stood up. He walked to the window and stared out at the street. I could see his shoulders were tense. His hands were in fists at his sides. How much? He asked without turning around. How much debt are we talking about? 45,000, Helen whispered. I heard the number, but it took a second to sink in. $45,000. Helen had $45,000 in credit card debt that she had never told her son about. Debt that she was secretly using our family's savings to pay off. And you're planning to take more? I asked. Just a bit more, Helen said. Another 1,000 or 2 a month. Just until I get it paid down. Once it's paid off, I'll stop taking from the account. The confidence in that statement was astounding. Like once the debt was gone, all of this would just be fine. Like stealing from your son was okay as long as you eventually paid him back. Mom, Michael said, and his voice broke a little. You used almost $40,000 of our money. Money that we were saving for a house. And you didn't even tell me. I know, Helen said. I know I should have. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. You could have come to me, Michael said, finally turning around. And I could see tears in his eyes now, real tears. You could have just told me the truth. We could have figured something out. I would have helped you. But you lied to me. You hid it from me. You stole from me. I didn't think of it as stealing, Helen said. It was our account. I thought... It was not just your account, I said, and I surprised myself with how cold my voice sounded. It was a joint account, with both of us. We trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. Helen looked at me, and for a moment, I thought she might actually understand what she had done. I thought maybe she would have a real moment of realization, but then her expression changed. Well, she said, and her voice was different now. It was harder, more defensive. If you didn't want me to use the money, you shouldn't have put so much in there. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's not... I started, but Michael put his hand up to stop me. Mom, I think you should leave, he said quietly. Michael, Helen started. I think you should leave, he said again. And I think we need to figure out what we're going to do about this situation. Helen stood up slowly. She looked between the two of us. She was still crying, or still trying to look like she was crying. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I didn't mean to hurt you. But actions aren't about intention, are they? Actions are about results. And the result was that Helen had stolen from her son, and she had lied about it. And when confronted, she had basically blamed us for the situation. That's not an apology. That's a justification. Michael walked her to the door without saying anything else. Helen left the casserole on the counter. I never did eat it. After she was gone, Michael came back and sat on the couch, and he put his face in his hands. I sat next to him and didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. His mother had betrayed him. That was the simple truth of it. And I could feel him processing that, working through it, coming to terms with the fact that the person he had loved and trusted his whole life was not who he thought she was. I'm sorry, he said finally. This is not your fault, I told him. I know, but I'm sorry anyway. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked questions. We both should have, I said. But we trusted her. That's not a bad thing. No, Michael said, but it's expensive. And that was the problem, wasn't it? Helen had taken our money. Our dream of buying a house was now delayed. Maybe significantly delayed. We would have to rebuild our savings. And in the meantime, Helen would still be out there, still having financial problems, probably still expecting us to help. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about the breach of trust. It was about the fact that someone we loved had lied to us, used us, and then tried to justify it. That night, I lay awake in bed next to Michael. He was asleep, but he wasn't sleeping well. He kept twitching, like he was having bad dreams. And I started to think about what we were going to do, because we couldn't just let this go. We couldn't just forgive her and move on and pretend nothing happened. But we also couldn't just cut her out of our lives forever. She was Michael's mother, and despite everything, Michael still loved her. But love doesn't mean you have to let someone take advantage of you. So I started to make a plan that would show Helen exactly what it felt like to be betrayed. A plan that would show her that actions have consequences. A plan that would make sure she never did this to anyone else again. I lay awake all night thinking about that plan, turning it over in my mind, making sure it was fair, making sure it was just. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Here's what I knew about Helen. She was scared. She had always been scared ever since her husband died. Scared of money, scared of the future, scared of being alone, scared of becoming a burden. And that fear had turned her into someone who lied, someone who stole, someone who betrayed her own son. But the thing about fear is that it's a tool, and in the hands of someone who understands it, it can be used to teach a very important lesson. I spent the next few days researching. I wanted to know everything about Helen's financial situation. I wanted to know how much debt she had, what her income was, what her expenses were. I wanted to build a complete picture of her financial life. Michael didn't ask what I was doing. I think he appreciated that I was taking action, that I was trying to figure out a solution instead of just crying about it. I pulled credit reports. I found out about all of her credit cards, not just the ones we knew about. She had 5 different cards, all of them maxed out. Combined debt was almost $60,000. She had medical debt from a procedure she'd had done 5 years ago that she'd never mentioned. She had a car loan. She had a second mortgage on her house. Helen was drowning in debt, and she had been drowning in it the entire time we knew her. And instead of asking for help, instead of being honest about her situation, she had stolen from us. That was the thing that hurt the most, I think. Not the theft itself, but the dishonesty. The fact that she didn't trust us enough to tell us the truth. I called my lawyer. I wanted to know what our options were. I wanted to know if we could press charges, if we could sue her, if there was any legal recourse. And my lawyer told me something that surprised me. "You could," she said. "You have documentation of the theft. You could definitely pursue legal action." "But," I said, because I could hear the but in her tone. "But it would destroy your relationship with your mother-in-law," she said, "and potentially with your husband. Is that what you want?" I had to think about that. Michael and I had talked about the situation. He was hurt. He was angry. But he also loved his mother. And I didn't want to be the reason their relationship ended. I didn't want to be the villain in this story. So legal action was out. But that didn't mean I had to let this go. That's when I realized something. The best revenge isn't about hurting someone. The best revenge is about taking back your power, about making someone face the consequences of their actions, about making sure they can't hurt you again. And I knew exactly how to do that. I talked to Michael about it, and he was hesitant at first, but I explained my thinking, and eventually he agreed. Here's what we did. First, we closed the joint account. We transferred the remaining $1,200 back to our personal account. We sent Helen a letter explaining that due to the unauthorized withdrawals, we had closed the account and that she would no longer have access to it. The letter was polite. It was professional. It explained what had happened and why we had made this decision. It didn't accuse her of anything, but it made it clear that we knew what she had done. Helen didn't respond to the letter for 3 days, and then she called. "Michael, we need to talk about this account situation," she said. And she sounded calm, controlled, like she had practiced what she was going to say. "There's nothing to talk about," Michael said. "The account is closed." "I understand you're upset," Helen said. "And I understand why. But I still need to be able to access money for emergencies. And I still have those credit card payments to make. What are you expecting me to do?" "That's not our problem anymore," Michael said. And I could hear something in his voice, a hardness that hadn't been there before. "You made your choices, and now you have to deal with the consequences." "So you're just abandoning me?" Helen said, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. "After everything I've done for you?" "Mom, you stole from us," Michael said, and his voice got louder. He had been holding this in. "You lied to us. You manipulated us. And now you're acting like we're the ones being unfair? That's not how this works." "I'm sorry," Helen said. "You know I'm sorry. But I can't just fix this overnight. I have real financial problems." "Then fix them honestly," Michael said. "Get financial counseling. Talk to a debt management company. Stop blaming other people for your situation. That's what adults do." And he hung up. Helen called back 3 times that day. Michael didn't answer. This was the hard part of the plan. This was the part where Helen would start to panic, where she would realize that she couldn't manipulate Michael anymore, that she couldn't count on us to bail her out. And that's when the fear would really set in. A week later, Helen called again. This time, she asked to speak to me. "Helen," I said, picking up the phone. I had been expecting this call. "Hi," she said quietly. I wanted to talk to you, woman to woman." "Okay," I said. I kept my voice neutral. Not cold, but not warm either. "I know I made mistakes," she said. "And I know you have every right to be angry with me. But I'm scared. I'm really scared. I don't know how I'm going to manage my payments without that account." "There are resources available," I said. I had prepared for this too. I had information ready. There's credit counseling, there's debt consolidation, there's financial planning services. Some of them are free, some are low cost. They can help you figure out a plan to pay off your debt. "I don't want to have to do that," Helen said. "I don't want everyone knowing about my financial problems." "Helen," I said carefully, "you stole from your son. You lied to him for 2 years. And you're worried about what people think? I think you need to get your priorities in order." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I know," Helen said finally. "I know you're right. I'm ashamed. I'm scared." "I know," I said. And honestly, I did feel some sympathy for her. But sympathy and enabling are 2 different things. But those feelings are yours to work through, not ours. "So you're never going to help me again?" Helen asked. "I didn't say that," I said. "But help looks different now. Help means you being honest about your situation. Help means you making real changes. Help means you taking responsibility for yourself instead of expecting other people to fix your problems." Helen cried. I could hear her on the other end of the line, crying quietly. "I made a big mistake," she said. "Yes," I said. "You did. I don't know how to fix it." "That's where the professional help comes in," I said. "There are people whose job it is to help people in your situation. You need to talk to them, not to us." And I meant it. Not out of cruelty, but out of actual care. Helen needed to learn how to handle her own problems. She needed to learn that there are consequences for lying and stealing. And she needed to learn that she was capable of fixing her situation without relying on other people to save her. For the next 3 months, we didn't hear much from Helen. She didn't call, she didn't visit, she didn't send cards or bring casseroles. It was like she had disappeared from our lives. And in a way, that was a relief. We could focus on rebuilding our savings. We could think about our future without feeling guilty about Helen's problems. But then, one day, Michael got a phone call at work. Helen wanted to talk to both of us. She wanted to come to the house. "I think you need to hear something," the message said. "Something important. Can I come by this Saturday?" Michael told me about the call, and we both wondered what it could be. Had something changed? Had she done something? Or was she going to ask us for money again? We decided to let her come. Saturday came, and Helen showed up at the door. She looked different. She looked tired, but she also looked determined. "Can we sit down?" she asked. We sat in the living room, the same place where this whole confrontation had started. And then Helen told us that she had finally done it. She had gone to a credit counselor. She had made a plan to pay off her debt. She had cut up all her credit cards except for one, which she kept in a drawer for emergencies only. She had started a second job, part-time work at a grocery store, to help pay down her debt faster. She had taken responsibility, and more importantly, she had come to tell us about it. "I know I can't undo what I did," Helen said. "I know I violated your trust, but I want you to know that I understand that now. I understand what I did to you, and to Michael, and to our relationship, and I'm working to be better." Michael didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, "I believe you." And I could see Helen's shoulders relax. "I also wanted to talk about repaying you," Helen said. She pulled out a piece of paper. "I've calculated what I took, with interest. It comes to about $41,000. I can't pay it back all at once, but I can pay you $500 a month. It will take about 7 years, but I will pay every penny back." "You don't have to do that," I said. "Yes, I do," Helen said firmly. "I have to, because if I don't, then I'm just making excuses. I'm just hoping you'll forgive me without me actually taking responsibility, and I know now that I need to take responsibility." And she pulled out a check. "This is the first payment," she said, handing it to Michael. "Consider it proof that I mean what I'm saying." It was for $500. Michael took the check and looked at it, and I could see his eyes were wet. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." But even though Helen had finally done the right thing, even though she was finally taking responsibility, something had changed. The trust was broken. And you can't fix broken trust just by apologizing and making payments. You can work toward earning back trust. But it takes time. It takes consistency. It takes proving over and over again that you're not going to do it again. Helen understood that now. And honestly, I think it was the best thing that could have happened to her. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you're willing to change. Helen had hit her rock bottom, and she was finally starting to climb back up. But the story wasn't over yet, because there was one more thing she was going to ask for. 6 months had passed since Helen started making her monthly payments. She had been consistent. Every month, like clockwork, a check would arrive in the mail for $500, sometimes a little more. Once, when she got a small tax refund, she sent $700. She was keeping her word. Michael had slowly started to warm back up to her. They had dinner together occasionally. They talked on the phone. The relationship was rebuilding, slowly but surely. And I was genuinely happy about that. I didn't want to see Michael estranged from his mother forever. I just wanted to see Helen be honest. I wanted to see her take responsibility. And she was doing that. But here's the thing about betrayal. It changes you. I was not the same person I had been before I found out about the theft. I was more cautious now, more aware. I paid closer attention to financial statements. I didn't trust as easily. And when Helen called and asked if she could come over, I felt that familiar tension in my chest. "She has something she wants to talk to us about," Michael said. He seemed nervous. "What?" I asked. "She didn't say. She said she'd explain when she got here." So we waited. Helen arrived on a Tuesday evening. She brought a pie, apple, Michael's favorite. But she didn't seem happy. She seemed stressed, worried. "What's going on?" Michael asked once we were all seated. Helen was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I need to ask you both for a favor, a big one." I felt Michael tense next to me. "What kind of favor?" I asked carefully. "I've been keeping my head above water," Helen said. "But barely. With the payments I'm making to you, plus my regular bills, plus everything else. I'm struggling, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Helen, Michael started. I'm not asking for money, Helen said quickly. I'm asking for something else. I'm asking if you would be willing to lend me money, a larger amount, enough to consolidate my debts. If I could do that, I could lower my monthly payments to the credit card companies, and then I could afford to keep paying you and also pay my regular bills without struggling so much. Michael looked at me. I looked away. This was the moment. This was the real test. Helen was asking us to lend her money, not a small amount. She was asking for probably $20,000 or $30,000 to consolidate her debt. And she was asking as if the theft had never happened, as if she hadn't stolen from us in the first place. How much? I asked. $25,000, Helen said. I know that's a lot, but if you lend it to me, I can pay you back, and I can finally get out of this hole I'm in. Michael opened his mouth, and I put my hand on his arm. Helen, I said, do you understand what you're asking? Yes, she said. I'm asking you to trust me again. You stole from us, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. You lied to us. You betrayed us. And now, after 6 months of payments, you're asking us to lend you another $25,000. I know, Helen said. I know what I did. And I know I haven't earned back your trust yet. But I'm trying. I'm working on myself. And this would help me so much. No, I said. Helen looked shocked. What? She said. No, I said again. We're not going to lend you money, and I'm going to tell you why. I stood up. I was shaking a little, but I kept going. You came to us today and asked us to trust you, to lend you $25,000, but you didn't come to us asking for advice. You didn't come to us asking what we thought you should do. You came to us assuming that we would just say yes, that we would just give you what you wanted. That's the same thing you did before. You assumed you knew what was best. You assumed you could make decisions about our money without asking us. And then you assumed we would forgive you and move on. But here's what I've realized. You're not asking us for a favor. You're asking us to enable you. You're asking us to save you from the consequences of your debt. And I'm not going to do that. Because here's the thing, Helen. You have options. You can file for bankruptcy. You can work with a credit counselor. You can get a second job. You can sell your house and downsize. You have options, but you don't want to do any of those things because they're hard and they're embarrassing. So instead, you come to us. You ask us to make your life easier. You ask us to fix your problems. And I'm done. I'm done with that. I'm done feeling guilty because you won't take responsibility for yourself. I'm done pretending that lending you more money is helping you, when really, it's just putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem. You need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet, and you can't do that if Michael and I keep saving you. Helen was crying now, but I didn't feel bad. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry. I thought you understood. I thought you forgave me. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what you did, Michael said quietly. I looked at him, surprised. He was speaking. Forgiveness is about moving forward, but moving forward doesn't mean we're going to keep enabling you. It means we're going to let you learn from your mistakes. Mom, I love you, but I can't fix your life. You have to do that. And you're not going to do that if we keep giving you money. Helen left shortly after that. She didn't take the pie with her. That pie sat on our counter for 3 days. Michael kept looking at it like he wanted to eat it, but he never did. Finally, I threw it away. It felt symbolic somehow. This gift she had brought, trying to soften us up before asking for money. This apple pie that was supposed to represent her love and care for her son. It just went to waste. Helen didn't call for 2 weeks after that. And then one day my phone rang. It was Helen. But she wasn't asking for money. She was telling me something. I went to a bankruptcy attorney, she said. I'm going to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It's not going to be easy, but it's the best option for my situation. The attorney said I might be able to discharge most of my debt. I didn't know what to say. I'm telling you because I wanted you to know that you were right, Helen continued. I wasn't being honest about my options. I was just hoping you would save me. And when you didn't, I finally had to get real about my situation. And the truth is, bankruptcy is probably going to help me more than anything else. Okay, I said. I'm glad you're doing what's best for you. And I'm going to keep paying you, Helen said. Even though the bankruptcy will technically discharge my personal debts, I still want to keep paying you. Because this debt is different. This is about rebuilding trust with my family. And you know what? She meant it. Helen went through the bankruptcy process. It was long and complicated and embarrassing for her, I'm sure. But she did it. And she kept making payments to us. Even though legally, she didn't have to. And slowly, over time, the trust started to rebuild. Not completely. Not back to where it was before. But it got better. Because Helen had learned something important. There are consequences for betraying people's trust. And those consequences are worth experiencing because they teach you something valuable. She learned that she was capable of taking responsibility for herself. She learned that she could survive without someone rescuing her. She learned that real relationships are built on honesty and integrity, not on manipulation and theft. And I learned something too. I learned that you can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can forgive someone without just forgetting what they did. You can move forward while still maintaining boundaries. And I learned that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about refusing to let them hurt you anymore. 2 years later, Helen finished paying back the $41,000. She sent the final check with a note that said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Michael cried when he opened that envelope. I did too, a little. We had a conversation that night about what we should do with the money. We could use it to start rebuilding our house fund. We could invest it. We could do a lot of things with it. But in the end, we decided to do something different. We decided to give it to Helen. Not as a gift, but as an investment. Michael and I had both been doing well financially. We had good jobs. We had been able to continue saving despite everything that happened. And we realized that Helen had done something remarkable. She had taken responsibility for a mistake that had seemed impossible to fix. So we gave her the money back. And we told her that we wanted to help her rebuild her life. Not by solving her problems for her, but by giving her the tools to solve them herself. With that money, Helen was able to take a financial management course. She was able to make some home repairs that she had been putting off. She was able to build up an emergency fund. And most importantly, she was able to move forward with her life knowing that she had been forgiven. Not because she had suffered enough, but because she had proven that she was willing to change. That meant something. Michael's relationship with his mother changed too. It was still close, but it was different. It was more realistic. Michael no longer expected his mother to be perfect. He no longer felt obligated to fix all her problems, and Helen no longer expected Michael to rescue her. They became more like two adults who loved each other rather than a son trying to save his mother. And our relationship with Helen became something unexpected. It became real. There were still awkward moments, times when Michael would remember what his mother had done and get angry all over again. Times when Helen would apologize for something, and we would see how much shame she was still carrying. But we worked through those moments, together. And I'm not going to lie and say that we became one happy family and everything was perfect from that point on. That's not how real life works. But we did something more important than that. We all learned that betrayal doesn't have to be permanent. That broken trust can be rebuilt. That people can change if they're willing to do the work. Helen never became the person I thought she was before. But she became someone better. She became someone who understood her own limitations, someone who could ask for help honestly, someone who could take responsibility for her mistakes. And that's worth something. As for me, I came out of this experience different too. I learned that kindness isn't the same as weakness, that protecting yourself from betrayal isn't selfish or cruel, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be violent or cruel, that sometimes the best revenge is just living well, just moving forward, just refusing to let someone's mistakes become your tragedy. Michael and I did eventually buy that house, by the way. It took us 2 extra years to save up the down payment, but we did it. And when we finally got the keys, Helen came over to help us celebrate. She brought a casserole. And this time, I ate it. Because this time, I knew that the casserole was just a casserole. It was made with love, yes, but it wasn't a manipulation. It wasn't part of some scheme to make us feel guilty or obligated. It was just a mother's way of saying, I'm proud of you, I'm happy for you, I love you. And that's something I never took for granted again. So what's the lesson here? I think there are actually several. First, I learned that you have to pay attention to your finances. I know that sounds boring. I know a lot of people don't want to spend time looking at bank statements and checking account balances. But the truth is that financial awareness probably would have caught Helen's theft much earlier. If I had been paying closer attention, if I had been reviewing the account regularly, we could have stopped this long before she had stolen $40,000. Protect your money. Not because you're paranoid or cheap, but because protecting your money is protecting your future. It's protecting your family's ability to reach their goals and dreams. Second, I learned that trust is not blind. Trust should be informed. Trust should come with verification. I trusted Helen without question, and that was a mistake. Real trust means checking in. It means asking questions. It means making sure that people are behaving the way they said they would behave. That's not paranoia, that's wisdom. Third, and this is maybe the most important one, I learned that you can't force someone to change. Helen didn't change because I was angry at her. She didn't change because Michael was disappointed in her. She changed because she had to. Because there were natural consequences to her actions, and she couldn't avoid those consequences by getting us to save her. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let someone experience the consequences of their choices, because that's the only way they're going to learn. And finally, I learned that forgiveness is a process. It's not something that happens in one moment. It's not something you do because you're supposed to. It's something that happens gradually as the other person proves through their actions that they're willing to change. I don't forgive Helen because she asked me to. I forgive Helen because she earned my forgiveness, because she did the work, because she took responsibility. And that forgiveness is stronger because it's real. Look, I'm not saying that everyone who betrays you will come to their senses and try to make things right. Some people won't. Some people will just move on to the next person they can manipulate or steal from. But that's not Helen's story. Helen's story is a story about a person who made a terrible mistake, who lied and stole and manipulated, but who, when faced with the consequences, decided to do better. And that takes courage. That takes humility. That takes the willingness to see yourself clearly and not like what you see, but to try to change anyway. I don't know if I would have had that courage, to be honest. I'm glad I never had to find out. But I'm grateful to Helen for showing me that change is possible, that people can be better than their worst moments, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean moving forward. If you're in a situation where someone has betrayed you, I want to tell you something. You have more power than you think. You don't have to let that betrayal define your life. You don't have to become bitter or cynical. You don't have to spend the rest of your life punishing the person who hurt you. But you also don't have to let them off the hook. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen. You don't have to enable them to hurt you again. What you can do is set boundaries. What you can do is refuse to rescue them from the consequences of their actions. What you can do is demand honesty and integrity going forward. And if they're willing to do that work, if they're willing to earn back your trust, then you have the chance to rebuild something real, something stronger than what came before, because it's no longer based on illusions. It's based on truth. And truth, even when it's painful, is always better than lies. So if you're dealing with betrayal right now, know that you're not alone. Know that there's a way forward. Know that you have the power to decide what happens next. And know that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well. It's just moving forward. It's just refusing to let someone else's mistakes become your tragedy. That's the real power. That's the real win.